We're going to be continuing our series today through the book of 1 Samuel. We're going to look at 1 Samuel chapter 5 and 6 today. Chapters 4, 5, and 6 are all one story that go together, and you might be looking at that saying, we're covering two chapters. These three chapters are smaller chapters than normal, but it is all one story, and I'm making it a two-parter rather than a three-parter. So that's where we're going to be today. And I'm looking forward to talking about this. Let me ask you a question. How big is your God? The God that you worship, how big is he and what is he able to do? Now, that's an important question. Everybody has a theology, okay? Everybody. Theology is the study of God. Even someone who says they don't have a theology actually has a theology. Their theology is there is no God, and that's their belief right there. All of us have some type of theology on who God is, how he interacts in creation, how he deals with things, either to lesser or greater extents, and how he operates. For Christians, we come week after week and we study the Bible to build our belief system about who God is. But a lot of times we have placed our own restrictions on God, how he works and how he operates. We view God a lot of times like an engineer would view something, having to figure out exactly the way he works. How can we possibly completely understand and define an infinite God with a finite mind? It's next to impossible. And even like last night when I was praying, I said something about how amazing God is. And I had to catch myself because that word right there, amazing, it's one of our best words to describe him, and yet it doesn't even scratch the surface. I mean, like, we throw that word around, amazing. Who else is amazing in our culture? Literally, if you go to a comic book store, The Amazing Spider-Man is the title of his comic, right? And yet, amazing, awesome, infinite. When I was a young man, I realized that I had put God in a box. I read things in the Bible, and I thought, well, that was cool that God did that then, but he doesn't do that today, and he would never do that for me. When I was in fifth grade, I was at an eye doctor, and he said to my parents, I think maybe your son has like some type of swollen nasal passage or infected nasal passage because his face is kind of lopsided. And what ended up happening as I went to different doctors, we discovered that I had a tumor. And basically, last night I found out when I said this, there were all these people on Facebook trying to figure out where my tumor was in my face. So that you don't have to go to Facebook, it's all of this side of my face, okay? From here all the way down, around, and back up. This is not bone. And it was growing quickly. At that time, there was only like 9 to 12 children in the entire United States that had this. And so I spent time up at OHSU being poked and prodded and experimented on. I ended up at a church service at the church where my dad pastored. We had a guest speaker, and he heard about my tumor. And he said, did you guys follow the instructions in the Bible of what to do? And at that time, we hadn't. What was he talking about? It's James chapter 5, verses 13 to 15. Is anyone among you suffering? Let him pray. Is anyone cheerful? Let him sing praise. Praise. Is anyone among you sick? Let him call for the elders of the church and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of faith will save the one who is sick, and the Lord will raise him up, and if he has committed sins, he will be forgiven. And so on a particular night, the pastors and elders of our church laid hands on me, anointed me with oil, and my tumor stopped growing. After that, the doctors up at OHSU were like, hey, we don't know what happened, but this seems to have stopped growing. My parents said, oh, well, we anointed him with oil, laid hands on him, and prayed for him. And they were like, oh, great, whatever you're doing, just keep doing it, right? That's kind of their response, like whatever you believe in. But that's what happened. And on that day, we discovered our God was so much bigger than what we thought. As we get in to the story in 1 Samuel 5 and 6, I'm just going to be cards on the table. This is a crazy story, all right? This is one of the nuttiest stories in the Bible. And on one hand, it shows the sovereignty, the holiness, the judgment of God. And on another hand, I really think this shows the character and sense of humor of God. Because of what he does in this. We're at a place where the first part of the story, the Philistines and the Israelites had gone out to battle against each other. The Israelites brought the Ark of the Covenant with them. The Ark of the Covenant was a large wood box overlaid with gold. It had rings on each side in which the Levites, the priestly clan or tribe of the Israelites, would insert large poles, and they could pick up the Ark of the Covenant and carry it. No one was allowed to touch the Ark of the Covenant. If you touched it, you died, okay? In the center of it, on top of the lid, were two statues of cherubim, these archangels, their wings coming up and touching, and in the middle of it was the Shekinah, or what we call the glory of God, his tangible presence, a glowing fire or flame, if you will. And God's presence was there. The Israelites brought the Ark of the Covenant onto the battlefield thinking, hey, we are now bringing God with us. We were defeated the first time by them. Thousands of us were killed. Now God is with us. But what they forgot was God had already twice given prophecies that judgment was coming against them for the sins of Eli the high priest and his two sons. And once again, they were defeated. And for the very first time in their history, the Ark of the Covenant is stolen. And now the Philistines have it. That's where we pick up this story. And we're going to do a running commentary through these two chapters. It says this in chapter 5, verse 1. When the Philistines captured the ark of God, they brought it to Ebenezer, from Ebenezer to Ashdod. The Philistines took the ark of God and brought it into the house of Dagon and set it up beside Dagon. And when the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, behold, look at the person next to you and say, behold. Behold. That means take note of what's being said. Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord. And so they took Dagon and they put him back in his place. But when they rose early the next morning, say it, behold, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord. The head of Dagon and both of his hands were lying cut off on the threshold. Only the trunk of Dagon was left to him. This is why the priests of Dagon and all who enter the house of Dagon do not tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. Now, as we're looking at this story in this chapter, we're introduced to this idol, a false god named Dagon. It's not the first time in the Bible we read Dagon. And in fact, the writer of 1 Samuel is writing in a way as if we already know who Dagon is. If we had read earlier, back in Judges, we see another story where we're introduced to Dagon. The Philistine people were Mediterranean seafaring raiders. They started raiding all across the coast of Africa and in the central and southern coast of Israel. By this time, they had set up 5 cities or towns, some walled, some not walled, in Israel. Now, those different towns had temples where they worshiped their primary god, Dagon. Who was he? In the pantheon that they worshiped, there was a god named Baal, who was their storm god, the god of the storm. Dagon was the father of Baal, okay? So maybe if you're familiar with other mythologies and systems, it's sort of like in Norse mythology. You have Thor, who is the god of thunder, the god of the storm, and he has a father, Odin, who's the all-powerful in their pantheon. That's who Dagon was to these people. He was a little bit hard to know if he is a god of just the sea and the river, a water god, or if he is a god of the harvest and fertility. In different locations, he seems to kind of take on both of those, if you will. But what we see throughout Canaan is that there was a god named Dagon, and we see it later in Assyria and in Nineveh, who was a god of fertility and harvest. We read about him in Judges, though. In Judges, there is a story that takes place in a different temple of Dagon. It's in Gaza, in the city of Gaza. In 1 Samuel, why didn't they take the Ark of the Covenant to the temple of Dagon in Gaza? Because years before this, there was an Israelite judge who had had his eyes gouged out. He was chained up between two pillars. His name was Samson, and he collapsed that entire temple of Dagon, killing himself and the 3,000 people that were inside worshiping Dagon and mocking God. So that's who Dagon is. What's taking place in this, as we saw in the previous chapter, the Philistines said to themselves when they were going out to battle, the God of the Israelites is here on the field. Nothing like this has ever happened before. We've never had to deal with a god of somebody else. They gave a rallying cry to their troops and said, "Be men, rise up. If we don't conquer them this day, they will make us our slaves, just as they will make us their slaves, just as we have been making them ours." So they've been enslaving the Israelites. Basically, they are now cheering. They're excited because they wiped out the Israelite army and they stole their God. And so what do? They bring the Ark of the Covenant with the glory of God in the middle, just a flame, and they place it at the feet of their God, Dagon. Basically saying, now your God has to worship our God. Your God bows down to our God, and your God is now enslaved to our God. What happens the next morning? Dagon's tipped over, right? He's laying on the ground. And they're like, whoa, not good, not good. Let's fix this. So they take the day and they get Dagon lifted back up and put in his place, right? And they're like, okay, that was a bad accident. We don't want that to happen, right? It's sort of like that old YouTube video of the drummer at church who's drumming away and the cross that's next to him tips over and falls on top of him, right? You don't want that to happen. The next morning, they come in again, and what do they see? It's not God, Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, bowing down to Dagon. Instead, Dagon has tipped all the way over, but it's just his trunk. His head and his hands have been cut completely off and are sitting at the threshold to the temple. This is God declaring to everybody that he will not share his glory with anybody else. He is not a slave to any statue or any false god or idol. He will not share his glory with anybody else. They tried to make him bow down to the statue. Instead, he makes twice the statue bow down to him. And I love at the end of that little paragraph there, it says, and even to this day, the people The priests and the Philistines won't walk over that threshold coming into the temple because they know that God did a holy thing right there. This is spiritual battle. This is spiritual battle. Basically, he made it so they can't come in the front door of their church anymore. They all have to go in the side door or the back door to get in there. Absolutely incredible, amazing, and hilarious. I love that God just does this. Verse 6, the hand of the Lord, Yahweh, was heavy against the people of Ashdod, and he terrified and afflicted them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory. And when the men of Ashdod saw how things were, they said, the ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is hard against us and against Dagon, our God. So they sent and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, what shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel? And they answered, let the God of Israel be brought around to Gath. So they brought the ark of the God of Israel there. But after they had brought it around, the hand of the Lord was against the city, causing a very great panic, and he afflicted the men of the city, both young and old, so that the tumors broke out on them. So they sent the ark of God to Ekron. But as soon as the ark of God came to Ekron, the people of Ekron cried out, they have brought around to us the ark of the God of Israel to kill us and our people. They sent therefore and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, send away the ark of the God of Israel and let it return to its own place, that it may not kill us or our people. For there was a deathly panic throughout the whole city. The hand of God was heavy there. The men who did not die were struck with tumors, and the cry of the city went up to heaven. As we look at this, we see that God not only humiliated their false god Dagon, but in that city, the men in the city are struck with tumors. And did you catch it says God's hand was heavy upon them? In the story, where was the last time we read about hands? Dagon's. The hands were how a deity had his power and worked and moved. Dagon's hands are cut completely off, but they recognize this God. He has a hand, and it is heavy. It is pressing down upon us. Think about that. Think about that. You ever have like a teacher when you were growing up that would walk behind you when you were misbehaving and would just kind of put their hand on your shoulder, and you would feel that weight of judgment coming, right? That's what it is. And the root word there for that heavy is actually glory. God's glory has a weightiness, a heaviness to it. It is real and it is tangible. And they are experiencing not the hands of Dagon, the God of fertility, the God of prosperity, the God of the harvest. They are experiencing instead the heavy hand of judgment of the one true God. In one city, they start getting tumors. So they say, let's get the Ark of the Covenant out of here. And another city says, hey, we'll take it. We want to humiliate it. We want that trophy. And so the Ark of the Covenant goes there. And what happens? All the men, young and old, in that city break out in tumors. And what we're going to find in the next chapter, there's also something going on where their cities and their fields start being infested with rats as well. Mice and rats destroying the harvest. And after the second city realizes what's going on, they're like, hey, we don't want this. Send it to that city over there. And as the Ark of the Covenant starts approaching that city, they're like, whoa, stop. We saw what it did in the last two cities. Don't you bring it here. What are you trying to do to us, right? And they don't know what to do with this thing. They're all struck with tumors. The heavy hand of the Lord. The next chapter starts with verse 1. It says this: the ark of the Lord was in the country of the Philistines for how long? 7 months. And isn't that interesting? The way the Lord works. The ark is going to end up leaving, we're going to see, but for those 7 months, judgment has been happening on the Philistines. Why is it important that it's 7? Because in the Old Testament, 7 is the literal number, but it also symbolizes the number of completion. Basically, this is a complete judgment that has taken place on the Philistines, these plagues that are happening. And now the time is coming where that judgment will be over. And the Philistines called for the priests and the diviners and said, "What shall we do with the ark of the Lord? Tell us with what we shall send it to its place." And they said, "If you send away the ark of the God of Israel, do not send it empty, but by all means return him a guilt offering. Then you will be healed, and it will be known to you why his hand does not turn away from you." And they said, "What is the guilt offering that we shall return to him?" And they answered, 5 golden tumors and 5 golden mice, according to the number of the lords of the Philistines. For the same plague was on all of you and on your lords. So you must make images of your tumors and images of your mice that ravage the land, and give glory to the God of Israel. Perhaps he will lighten his hand from off of you and your gods and your land. Why should you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh hardened their hearts? After he had dealt severely with them, did they not send the people away and they departed? Now then, take and prepare a new cart and 2 milk cows on which there have never been a yoke, and yoke the cows to the cart, but take their calves home away from them. And take the ark of the Lord and place it on the cart, and put it in a box at its side, the figures of gold, which you are returning to him as a guilt offering. Then send it off and let it go its way. And watch, if it goes up on the way to its own land, to Beth Shemesh, then it is he who has done us this great harm. But if not, then we shall know that it is not his hand that struck us. It happened to us by coincidence. You look at this, and there's several things happening in this story. One, as the Philistine leaders go to the priests and are saying, "How do we fix this? What do we do?" Note that the priests are comparing their situation to Egypt. And there is a lot of similarities between this. What happened in Egypt? God's people were slaves. And God started telling Pharaoh through Moses and Aaron, "Let my people go." When they would not, he struck them with plagues and with boils and with frogs, all these different things upon them. And he dealt severely with them, the last one being a plague of death on the firstborn, a plague of death throughout Egypt. And the only way to escape that last plague was to give an offering of a lamb's blood on a doorpost. And if you did that, it was a way to avoid that last plague. And with that, Pharaoh and the Egyptians let the Israelites go. They're looking at this and saying, we need to learn from their lesson. Because the same way God dealt with them, he is now dealing with us. He's now dealing with us. And specifically how, remember, Dagon, god of fertility, god of the harvest. When you look at the Egyptian plagues, each one of the plagues lines up with one of the gods that the Egyptians worshipped. Lines directly up to it. And God is showing, you worship this God that blesses you this way, I will put this curse upon you, showing that I am greater. So what does he do? Plague. And we find mice or rats are devouring all their harvests, going everywhere. Who is the true God of the harvest? And when we read on, we're going to see in Israel, there's a harvest taking place. He also strikes them with tumors. And the priests say, you need to bring a guilt offering to God. You need to admit to the Lord that you sinned against him, you've transgressed against him, and this offering will be 5 gold tumors and 5 gold mice. Now, that's weird. All right, that's weird. What does that look like? Okay, that word there, tumor, for translators is incredibly difficult to translate because they don't have a corresponding word. And it's translated differently in different areas. The word literally means a rising or swelled area, all right? A part of your body that is rising or swollen. And so in the medieval period, Jewish rabbis started translating that hemorrhoid, all right? And if you look at your King James, that's what you're going to see. So, some people believe that's what he struck them with. All of the men in the Philistine cities, both young and old, for 7 months had hemorrhoids, all right? And that's why I think this is funny, all right? I mean, there's no getting away from this. Every time they sit down, they're reminded of their sin against God, right? And that could be the case, that it's hemorrhoid. Newer translations like the ESV and other ones are like, well, that doesn't make sense because how do you make a golden offering of a hemorrhoid, right? So they're like, well, let's translate it tumors. And that's always like, I don't know what that looks like. I mean, I guess look at my face, right? But you look at it, it's like tumor. All right, what does that do? There's a new way that some people are looking at this, and it's based off of archaeological finds that basically with different things they're finding in our archaeology, that they're finding recently these phallic symbols that are full of water, and that it's almost the same exact word. And so some theologians now are saying it could actually be that he struck all of the men, both young and old, with STDs or ED for these 7 months, which if he's a God of the harvest and fertility, then that is literally God saying, oh yeah, watch this, right? Whatever it is, like there's all these different ideas, and I am enjoying thoroughly watching your faces through this conversation. This is always really fun when you hit this stuff. Just so you know, the Bible is not PC. The Bible's not PC. And in fact, translators always tame it down from what it actually says all the time. It's not politically correct. So like when Elijah is taunting the priest of Baal, in our translation, it'll say, where is your God? Is he busy? Forgive me if I'm crass. It's what the Bible says. It actually says, where's your God? Is he pooping? Right? But we are, you guys, even with that, you guys are, oh, that's what it says, all right? We try to tame it down. And so you look at this, whatever God's doing here, he is just like, oh yeah? You guys think you have conquered me? For 7 months, I am going to mess with you. I am going to do things to you that you never thought would happen. And it even got so great that what do we see from that section? Even these evil, violent, idol-worshiping pagans realized we're guilty before this God. They even repent and bring him an offering. They recognize we have sinned against this God, and now we will bring an offering to him. I won't even get into the whole thing with the cows and how they guided it. That's another long story. We're short on time. So let's finish out this story. I started scrolling and I lost my place. Okay, there. Found it. Verse 10. The men did so and took 2 milk cows and yoked them to the cart and shut up their calves at home. And they put the ark of the Lord on the cart and the box with the golden mice and the images and their tumors, and the cows went straight in the direction of Beth Shemesh along one highway, lowing as they went. They turned neither to the right nor to the left, and the lords of the Philistines went after them as far as the border of Beth Shemesh. Now the people of Beth Shemesh were reaping their wheat harvest in the valley. And when they lifted up their eyes and saw the ark, they rejoiced to see it. The cart came into the field of Joshua of Beth Shemesh and stopped there. A great stone was there. And they split up the wood of the cart and offered the cows as a burnt offering to the Lord. And the Levites took down the ark of the Lord and the box that was beside it, in which were the golden figures, and set them upon the great stone. And the men of Beth Shemesh offered burnt offerings and sacrificed sacrifices on that day to the Lord. And when the 5 lords of the Philistines saw it, they returned that day to Ekron. These are the golden tumors that the Philistines returned as guilt offerings to the Lord. 1 for Ashdod, 1 for Gaza, 1 for Eshkelon, 1 for Gath, and 1 for Ekron. And the golden mice, according to the number of all the cities of the Philistines, belonging to the 5 lords, both fortified cities and unwalled cities. The great stone beside which they set down the ark of the Lord is a witness to this day in the field of Joshua of Beth Shemesh. Quick side note, you're going to see throughout this book as we study it, that when God moves and does different things, when he brings victory and blessings, they set up monuments and memorials so that they can remember what God did. What are we doing next week at 12:30? We are having a barbecue. Why? It is our time to remember the gift that God gave us in giving our church our own home. Come and celebrate with us. Verse 19, and he struck some of the men of Beth Shemesh because they looked upon, or they looked in, the ark of the Lord. He struck 70 men of them, and the people mourned because the Lord had struck the people with a great blow. Then the men of Beth Shemesh said, who is able to stand before the Lord, this holy God? And to whom shall we go up away from us? So they sent messengers to inhabitants of Kiriath Jearim, saying, the Philistines have returned the ark of the Lord. Come down and take it up to you. You look at this, and this whole story, 3 chapters long, starts with the judgment against Eli and his 2 sons. It ends up with the judgment against Israel. The Ark of the Covenant goes to the Philistines, and while they're there, they mock the Lord, and they approach him in ways that are irreverent. And so what does God do? He judges the Philistines for 7 months. When we get to the end of this, it seems like a great story because the Ark of the Covenant has come home. And these people in the village of Beth Shemesh are doing what? They're out harvesting. God has given them this incredible blessing of a harvest. And they're there just excited about this. And then the ark comes. What do? They take the wood and they give burnt offerings to the Lord. They take the cows and they sacrifice them to the Lord. What is that? They are approaching the Lord and worshiping him the way he said to. In his word, he said, come to me like this. And at first, they come to him in obedience. But then, they get way too comfortable. And suddenly, they go to him in a way he said not to. Because they were commanded in God's word never to touch or to look inside the ark. They did it, and 70 people die. Awful. Once again, a judgment. And what is their response? This is a holy God. Who can stand before him? Get him out of our presence. Get him away. And they send the ark off. God was there in their presence. The literal Shekinah, the tangible glory of God. And when they approached him in obedience, as he said, everything was fine. But then they decided to approach him, not as he said, but how they wanted to. Not in reverence, but in rebellion. And they were judged for it. That's scary. But it's an important thing for us to understand, because serving the Lord requires obedience to his word. In fact, even Jesus, at the Last Supper, 2 different times, he said to his disciples, if you love me, you will obey my commands. If you love me, you will obey me. Brothers and sisters, that is so incredibly important. We have a God who is a holy God that we can approach because of the blood of Jesus Christ. We have to understand that. But there's a very important verse, and I think it's the biggest lesson out of all of these. The Philistine priests said, don't be like Pharaoh and the Egyptians, who hardened their hearts towards God. That is echoed in Psalms. Psalm 95, 6-8 says this, "O come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our God, our Maker. For he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture and the sheep of his hand. And today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts." Brothers and sisters, we're going to end this service like we do at our church, in ways that are prescribed by God of how we should come to him. We are going to sing praises. We're going to pray, and we're going to take communion. Come before him in awe and reverence. And we are able to do that because there was a guilt offering paid for us. He paid it himself on the cross.